resourcing the IRS. It has been chronically underfunded for quite a while. And so what we need to do, and what Congress passed and the president signed, was budget for IT modernization to get out those problems that you described. We're not on paper anymore. Unfortunately, the IRS is working in too many manual processes. They're having too many technical issues. And this was a glide path over a number of years to improve resources for the IRS, which is the largest independent bureau at the Treasury Department and is where the U.S. government collects tax revenue.
Okay, so if the IRS hypothetically had, say, $14 billion less to work with, what actually happens inside the IRS at that point? Or maybe a better question is what won't happen?
Yeah, they're arguing that it is more efficient for tax collection, that they are able to improve the ability for tax collection, so they're able to recoup more money and reduce leakage in tax inefficiencies, recover more money for the government for money that people, companies, other entities owe to the government. They actually collect that money.
Well, people talk about the IRS, and we went through this whole thing with armed guards or armed agents knocking down your door last year, which was, of course, that did not turn out to be true or have anything to do with the $80 billion that the IRS needed. Can you imagine, I mean, just as a little bit of a tangent here, how awful it would be to work there? I mean, you're dealing with, like Windows 95 machines that don't turn on, and you're dealing with really horrible resources, and you're being asked to do pretty dry work here. These aren't people knocking down doors. They're actually processing your tax returns, which sounds like tedious labor, and we need somebody to do it, right?
Absolutely. And the people I've worked with when I was at Treasury and different parts of government, they are public servants, they are civil servants, not there for the money. They're there to help improve tax collection and improve public services for everyday Americans, for all 330 million plus Americans. And those are the people who I met. IRS does have a small component for law enforcement, IRS criminal investigations, and they do critical work, and they investigate cryptocurrency tax evasion. They go after some of the worst criminal tax evaders. So it's a necessary function, but a small part of what the overall bureau does.
Okay, so to bring this conversation full circle, as you talk about criminals, we also should talk about terrorists, or at least designated terrorists by the U.S., because ultimately this IRS conversation is tied to the Israel and Hamas conversation. We actually are just getting headlines out from the White House press briefing in which Admiral Kirby, is the spokesperson for the NSC, is talking. He says, no indication that Hamas has gotten any of the aid sent to Gaza. And this speaks to the difficulty in trying to get humanitarian aid in for innocent civilians while also not trying to contribute in any way to the designated terrorist organization and its activities. How hard is this kind of financing right now?
You exactly hit the nail on the head. This is a constant balance for imposing sanctions against foreign terrorist organizations like Hamas. Hamas has been designated since 1997 by the State Department, 2001 by Treasury, and yet they've been able to assemble this horrific militia, kill thousands of civilians, and murder innocents and take hostages, even with some of the most robust safeguards in the world to combat terrorism financing. Meanwhile, the people in Gaza are suffering, and so there's a need to balance strict counterterrorism financing measures, economic sanctions against Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while ensuring that the safe, responsible delivery of aid and aid resources get to those in need. And this is a tension we've seen here in Gaza. We've seen it in Afghanistan, where I've worked in the past. We see it in many conflict zones around the world.
Well, so how do they move that money? How is that money delivered? We're sitting next to the crypto expert here, and I'm sure Kaylee has more informed questions that I'm going to ask. But to what extent do we think, and I've seen several reports about this, to what extent was crypto used in funding Hamas and this attack?
So we're seeing evidence that Hamas and other terrorist groups have raised money through crypto. It's not a significant amount of money relative to the other sources of funding. But according to Senator Loomis, I've also thought about this. There's no de minimis amount for allowing terrorism financing. Any amount, even $1, as Senator Loomis said, is unacceptable. And I take that position as well. Yeah. So these organizations have raised money, though, from Iran. And at least $60 to $100 million a year are the reported estimates from U.S. and Israeli sources. But Hamas controls territory in Gaza. They raise at least $300 to $400 million a year through taxation, through extortion, through other ways that they control physical territory. They control the ground, like ISIS, like other terrorist groups. So it's really unique in that respect. They were designated many years ago as a different type of insurgent organization, rogue terrorist organization. Now they govern, they control territory, they oppress people and tax and extort them.